Hi, I'm Dr. Alauna, and I'm excited today to partner with Dr. Lulu for the Stop Suicide Now Summit. Go to stopsuicidenowsummit.com for more information. Well, my role today is to talk to you about suicide and how to survive the suicidal storm, the biology of deadly thinking. Yes, there is biology to how we think and the reasons that we have suicidal thoughts. So, first, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Lana, trauma psychiatrist. I was practicing for 12 years in the VA with military veterans, and I was a PTSD specialist. Also, I treated personality disorders, addiction disorders, and all manner of other things that relate to people having experienced traumas. And what I began to understand is that we really need to focus on examining how the brain processes information in order to understand trauma. So today, for Dr. Lulu's audience, you are going to get, and whoever comes to this information, you are going to get a crash course in the design of the human body. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for listening to this talk. So check this out. Here is the anatomy of a creator. I have good news for you. You, as a human being, are a very, very powerful creature. Of course, you have a physical body, and that's a really important part of you. That's your organs, that's your tissues, that's your cells, and your brain, and the things that you can touch. And then you also have an invisible self, a part of you that you may not pay very much attention to, but that those are the parts of us that we can't see, but we know that those parts are there. So those are things like your thoughts, your emotions, your mind. Those help to create your action choices. So what does that have to do with this talk, Dr. Lana? What are you meaning? So here's the thing. We think 75,000 to 120,000 thoughts a day, the average human being. We think thousands and thousands of thoughts per day. And the good majority of those thoughts have a tendency to be negative. Why are those thoughts negative? Because our natural biological responses are programmed towards more negative thinking than we ever have been taught to pay attention to. So in order to really understand your body and how you experience things, you really need to know more about your brain. And I teach about brain systems in my talk, but today I'm only going to go into three important brain systems that can really help you when it comes to understanding suicidal thoughts. So we have to think about how our brains are actually designed. We have six primitive brain systems that are really important to understanding emotions and how you process information and experience inside of your brain. The first one that you need to understand is your reticular activating system. Your reticular activating system is part of your brain that filters information. When you're filtering this information, your reticular activating system is screening for what is happening around you in your environment. Please hear me clearly. None of us experience reality as it actually is. We all think that our version of reality is the reality, but all of our brains are screening the environment differently and focusing in on certain parts or other parts that are programmed based on the negative and positive experiences that we've been through in the past. Our negative experiences, especially our traumatic experiences, program our brain to focus very heavily on things that are painful to us. An simple example of how this works in your life that many people can attest to is if you've ever decided you wanted a car, all of a sudden it seems like that car starts popping up all over the road. Did everybody go buy your car? Probably not. Those cars were already there, but once you decided that was the car that you liked, your reticular activating system begins to identify that more often in your environment. Why is this important to suicidal thoughts? When people are experiencing a lot of painful experiences, your mind is going to be looking more for those painful experiences to happen again so that you can be psychologically prepared for it, if you will, braced for it emotionally. Well, the problem with this is that oftentimes that means that our minds are honing in on things that are potentially painful and expanding our focus on those things. And that may cause a narrowing of attention or a focus on hurtful, painful, and negative aspects of our life. The reticular activating system, remember that. Next, we have the amygdala. Your amygdala is part of your fight or flight system. It's an ancient system that's been in human beings before we even had the language to call ourselves human beings. Your amygdala creates your emotions, and as you process your emotions, it will send signals into your body that we call feelings that create the physical responses that are very powerful and very strong in order to inform us or move us about those emotions. Let me say it more clearly. Your amygdala is what makes you feel whatever feeling that you have. And it does not create that feeling based on a objective, external, removed reality evaluation of the situation. It creates your experience of the moment, whether it's anger or happiness and joy, calm, anxiety, fear. All of those come from the amygdala, and it creates it based on what you are telling yourself about that particular situation. You will have the emotions that are directly proportional to how you describe a thing to yourself. So that is important to understand that your emotions are created by you. So in other words, the way most of us are taught to think, other people make us happy, other people make us mad, other people are doing things that are causing the emotions inside of us. But we have not been taught that our emotions are actually seated in ourselves and that we have to pay close attention to those hundreds of thousands of thoughts that we are having that are actually going to create sensations inside of us and a roller coaster that we actually have to ride. There's no such thing as not having emotions. In fact, we all have them all the time. That's one of the few things that I feel very comfortable using the word all or always, because our brain doesn't shut off even when we're asleep. Your brain is running and your amygdala is generating emotions and responses that actually play out inside of your body. So it's important. I'm sorry, I forgot to move over to the amygdala. It's important to understand your amygdala because you have to recognize it in a suicidal crisis. Because what your amygdala will do is tell you the most extreme version of the events. Nobody cares. Nobody loves me. I'd be better off dead. They'd be better off if I were not here. There's nothing that I can do to fix this situation. There's no reason to keep going. Everybody hates me. Nobody likes me. Um, I'm sure we can think of many other thoughts that may pass through a person's mind in order for them to be thinking about ending their life here on earth in this physical body. Now, we know that the spirit entity, most belief systems would say that our spirit entity is everlasting and eternal. However, we certainly do experience the powerful sensations of this physical body in this lifetime that we have to manage. So, the next brain system that you need to understand is your somatosensory cortex. Your somatosensory cortex is the place where your body experiences pain signals. Those pain signals can come from any location in your body. The interesting part about the somatosensory cortex is that it doesn't differentiate between physical and psychological pain. It treats them the same way. So if I were standing on a hot coal right now, I would feel pain in my foot that would shoot up to my brain and my somatosensory cortex and say, hey, something's wrong down here. We need a fix. And your somatosensory cortex will relay a pain signal into you that will tell you, move. And hopefully you do it and minimize the damage. Well, similarly, our somatosensory cortex also responds to emotional or psychological pain in the same way. It actually creates pain signals inside of your body. So yes, folks, it's not all in your head. When you are experiencing something that is emotionally painful, like someone yelling at you or telling you that your reality isn't real, or having to deny a part of yourself that you know is in you, or having to be told that you're not experiencing this racism, or you're the problem. We're not the problem. There's lots of ways that we experience negative emotions without people actually touching us. Oftentimes, physical threat does come with emotional threat, but I think sometimes we try to falsely separate the two. How can we have injury, physical injury, and not also have emotional injury? So really, those are all tied together. But the point is that there really is real pain that you're feeling in your body. A lot of people are taught to ignore this experience of psychological pain that we have when we're thinking about the state of the world, or we're thinking about how the state of our situation, or whatever individually may be happening. Maybe you've lost your job and you don't know how to get back on your feet, and your brain is raging about, how do I pay these bills? How do I take care of this? Your stress is shaking around, making your mind unclear. And in all of that, you may be missing talents and skills. Not maybe, you likely, statistically likely, are missing skills and opportunities and the confidence to make those things into ways to get yourself out of whatever that financial situation is. So that's kind of the way that these systems work together to create suicidal thoughts and to create struggles with that emotional roller coaster. Because if you're telling yourself that your life is over, or that there's nothing anybody can do, or that no one cares, or that, I used to tell my patients all the time, they'd say, doc, I'm sick of this shit. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I still here? Why keep going through this pain? And I would have to say, like, looking at your life and what you told me and the things that you've been through, yeah, you had a tough situation. And as a matter of fact, it would make sense that who in their right mind would want to continue going forward, being abused, being harmed, being addicted in certain ways, being used, being manipulated. Absolutely, that emotional roller coaster is painful. But the other side of it is having the skills and being able to recognize and learn to control what the person is creating for themselves, whether that is learning to control their addictions, whether that's learning to take control of how they allow themselves to interact in their relationships, whatever it is, there are effective actions that can help people move into the next space. But sometimes when you're in the heat of the suicidal crisis, your amygdala is creating so much input that it can make it feel like there's no hope, there's nothing that you can do. And that primitive input from those primitive brain systems, your reticular activating system, your amygdala, and your somatosensory cortex, just those three, and I haven't even talked about the other six, they create shitty thinking, shitty primitive thinking. Yes, shitty ass thinking. Your thinking is stinking. And how do I know that your thinking is stinking? Because it's a natural part of the human body and brain and the way that we process information. And so what's interesting is that if you start to learn to recognize the primitive thinking, it really can help your mind to be able to process things differently. So subjective, shitty is subjective, opinion-oriented labeling. Is the word that you're using for yourself or that other person, is that your version of reality? Is that your opinion? Is that the label that you've been taught and how to interpret that person? And is it fully accurate? Most of the time, I would challenge you to consider that maybe using words like stupid, lazy, ugly, final, all of the words that we have a tendency to label on things, they don't help emotionally. They cause us to feel a lot of negative red emotions, harsh, judgmental in nature. Is what you're saying to yourself extremely judgmental in nature? I call it the ass kicking contest. A lot of times when people in suicidal crisis, what they're doing mentally is beating themselves up and really giving more energy to the negative aspect of themselves, or the potential negative that could come out of it. You'll never get out of this. There you go, fucking up again. There you go. And I curse, by the way, because a lot of times that's how people's minds are thinking, even though they may not use that language out loud. So when you're thinking harshly, it has a negative impact inside of you, because remember, your amygdala creates emotions based on what you are telling yourself about the situation. So listen to your own mind. Are you thinking of something in an intense way? Because it will generate an intensity inside of your body. You'll feel when your amygdala revs up, just like gun in a car engine, because you'll want to scream, you'll want to yell, you want to cry. You might shut down completely, because many people get in a space of emotional overload to where they almost can't function psychologically. You may feel extremely fatigued. All of those things are because your body is burning energy with those negative thoughts that are leading you into a space where you may feel like suicide or leaving this mug is the only option. Terrorizing, recreating fearful things and traumas in your own mind. Sometimes our primitive brain systems are actually showing us things that are potentially painful, but we treat them as if they are happening in the now. And by not recognizing the difference between our brain screening and helping us identify the threat ahead of time versus treating it as if that threat is real now, we are actually more likely to react in a way where we create pain, not only for ourselves, but for other people in our lives that are just trying to figure out this biology too. And they probably don't know what you do now, because now you know more about your own primitive brain that you are responsible for wrestling. Your thoughts can be toxic. That's the next T in shitty. Are your thoughts toxic to yourself? When you are thinking, understand that that is the invisible psychological part of you. That's your psyche, your spirit. And no one can change your mind for you. You have to listen to your mind and understand that you are in control of those thoughts. And the ones that you let come out of your mouth, the ones that you allow yourself to believe, they come right out of you and go in a feedback loop right into your mind and help to create that shitty feeling and those shitty primitive experiences that you continue to have. How do we get out of this cycle? Dr. Lana, everything is shitty. What? How do we do this? Well, you can be done with trauma thinking by activating your prefrontal cortex. How do you do that? You use the done skill. What, Dr. Lana? Is that simple? Absolutely. What you have to learn to do is pop the bubble between what your primitive brain is presenting to you and what your higher evolved mind can identify as an effective behavior in terms of thoughts, emotions, and actions that you can take in that situation to create the next best thing for you, to be able to, if you will, drive your very powerful technology out of whatever hole you are in. And what we often find is that after a suicidal crisis and the intensity of the biological response, the amygdala dies down, a person can look at things with a little more balance and say, okay, well, there was a space where I was thinking nobody actually cared about me, and I forgot about that friend that reached out. I forgot about that situation that I have. I forgot about that family member who's constantly praying for me. I don't think about those things when I can't see them, because my RAS is narrowed, my amygdala is storming, and my somatosensory cortex is feeding me so much pain that within my narrow bubble of perception, the only thing that I can see as an option is to die, to kill myself. And truthfully, more people than we will ever know walk around in that space. It's really not as uncommon as you would think if we were honest and had safe space to talk about how miserable it can be to live in a world where almost a daily basis we're traumatized psychologically and visibly, and that's not validated. So I'm here today to tell you that there is a way to begin to intentionally use your prefrontal cortex to involve yourself by using empathy skills practice to activate your brain's ability to find better options. So please join me at the Trauma Recovery Academy and learn more. Sign up for the empathy skills practice course. It's $1 a month. Oh, doc, why is it $1 a month? Because the need is there. And I know that people can come up with $1. So please tell your friends, tell your family, tell anybody who's struggling with controlling the powerful manifestations of emotions in this animal to come join Dr. Alauna and become a student at the Trauma Recovery Institute. Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute. And I will see you soon. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless.